Today, we're diving into a question that I think drives every chess player crazy at some point. How do you actually get better? We're going to look past just putting in more hours and find a proven, much smarter way to improve your game.
Does this sound familiar? You're playing game after game, you're watching tons of videos, maybe you're even cracking open some books, but your rating just will not budge. It's like you're stuck on this incredibly frustrating plateau. Every time you get a win, a loss comes right after and puts you back where you started. You are definitely not alone in this, and I promise you, it has nothing to do with a lack of talent. There's a real reason this happens, and even better, there's a clear way to fix it.
Just take the story of Alex Crompton. After he got hooked on chess, he played 500, yes, 500 blitz games in just 1 month. He thought just playing a ton would make him better, and what happened? His rating actually went down. He found himself in the bottom 5% of all players on chess.com. His story is the perfect example of the problem we're tackling. Just doing a bunch of chess stuff isn't the same thing as improving at chess.
So, here's our game plan to break out of that cycle. First, we're going to define the problem, the random study trap. Then, I'll introduce you to the engine of all improvement, the feedback loop method. After that, we'll get practical and actually design a study plan. And finally, we'll talk about the secret ingredient that makes it all work, your chess psychology.
Okay, let's jump into our first section, the random study trap. This is all about figuring out why that feeling of just spinning your wheels is so common. It's the reason a player can spend 10 years playing and still have the same rating they had after their first year. It's time to figure out why just throwing more time at the board almost never works.
This right here, this slide shows the core issue. On the left, you've got activity. This is what most of us do. We play endless blitz games, which really just reinforces our bad habits. We watch random YouTube videos about some obscure opening we're never going to play. We try to memorize 20 moves of an opening without having any clue why those moves are good. It feels productive, but honestly, it's mostly just noise. Now, on the right, you have progress. That's targeted, focused work that actually builds your skills. The key thing to get is this. Activity keeps you busy, but only progress makes you better.
And this whole trap actually has a name. It's called naive practice. It's when you just keep doing something, like playing blitz, over and over again, without any real goal or any system for getting feedback. Sure, when you're brand new, this works for a little bit. You'll see some quick gains. But then, bam, you hit a hard ceiling. And why is that? Well, it's because naive practice doesn't fix your weaknesses. It just cements your current habits, the good and the bad. It's kind of like practicing a golf swing with a known flaw. If you do it 1,000 times, you're not getting better, you're just making that flaw permanent.
So, if naive practice is the big problem, what's the solution? Let's get to our next section, the feedback loop method. I want you to think of this as a powerful, systematic engine. This is the machine that's going to pull you out of that muddy plateau and start driving your improvement forward, day in and day out.
And here is that engine, broken down into its parts. Grandmaster Avitek Grigorian calls us the fundamental formula for getting better, and it's just 3 simple steps. First, you study. You take in some specific new information. Maybe it's a tactical pattern like a fork or an endgame concept like the rule of the square. Second, you practice. You go out and actively try to use that specific thing in your games. And third, and this is the part almost everyone skips, you fix. You analyze your games, you find where you messed up, and you figure out how to correct it. Then the whole cycle just starts over. Study, practice, fix. Simple.
This quote from Grandmaster Noel Studer it nails the mindset behind this method. We tend to think of practice as something experts do to stay sharp, right? Like maintenance. But that's completely backwards. Practice, when you do it the right way, is the very thing that creates the expertise. It's not the result of being good, it's the cause.
GM Studer calls this idea deliberate practice. And this isn't just any old practice, it's practice with a clear purpose. It really comes down to 3 things. First, do what matters. Focus your energy on the stuff that's actually going to win you more games, like tactics and basic ending games, not the latest opening fad you saw in a tournament. Second, do it well. This means you train with 100% focus. Phone is off, TV is off, no distractions. And third, do it consistently. Building a skill is like building a muscle. Short, regular workouts are way more effective than one giant, occasional cram session.
Okay, so we get the theory, right? Ditch the naive stuff, adopt the deliberate feedback loop. But what does that actually look like day to day? Let's move on to section 3 and turn all this theory into a real, actionable plan you can start using tonight.
Here's the sample plan that's all about balance. Now notice what gets the most time. Tactics training and analyzing your own games. That's a whopping 60% of your study time right there. And why? Because tactics decide the vast majority of games for club players, and analyzing your own mistakes, well, that is the fix part of our feedback loop. The other 40% is split between studying fundamental endgames, where so many games are decided, and reviewing classic games from the masters to soak up strategic ideas.
Let's make this even more real. Active learning isn't just a concept, it's about what you do. For tactics, don't just solve random puzzles. Use something with spaced repetition to really burn those patterns into your brain. For game analysis, the golden rule is review it yourself first. Try to find your own blunders before you let the engine tell you everything. For endgames, stick to the essentials, like what you'd find in a book like 100 Endgames You Must Know. These are the positions that show up all the time. And when you're looking at master games, don't just click through the moves. Your job is to pause and ask, what would I play here? And then try to understand the why, the plan behind the moves.
All right, we've got the method, we've got a plan, but there's one more piece to this puzzle. And you know what? It might just be the most important one. Let's get into our final section, mastering your chess psychology. This is what GM Avatick Grigorian calls the secret sauce. It's the ingredient that makes everything else actually stick.
It's a really simple but profound idea. The biggest thing holding most players back isn't their talent or a lack of knowledge. It's their mindset. How you approach learning, how you deal with making mistakes, and what you decide to focus on. These are the things that multiply the effectiveness of every single minute you spend studying. Here is one of the biggest mindset shifts you can possibly make. Stop chasing a rating number. On the left, you see outcome goals, like I want to hit 1500 ELO. The problem is, you don't actually control your rating directly. So when you focus on it, you're tying your self-worth to this number that goes up and down, which just leads to frustration and anxiety. But on the right, you have process goals, like I'm going to solve puzzles for 20 minutes every day. That you can control. By focusing on the process, you build the habits that, over time, will naturally get you the outcome you want, but without all the stress. You start to see yourself as someone who studies chess, not just someone with a certain rating. And this is the magic of focusing on the process. It's the idea of getting just 1% better each day. It sounds so small, right? Almost like nothing. But that tiny, consistent improvement, it compounds. Over a year, getting 1% better every day doesn't make you 365% better, it makes you almost 38 times better. That is the incredible power of consistent, deliberate practice when it's fueled by the right mindset. So what does your path forward look like? It's these 4 steps. First, you've got to recognize and just consciously ditch that random, naive practice. Second, build all your training around that powerful study, practice, fix feedback loop. Third, create a balanced and consistent plan that focuses on the big stuff, like tactics and your own games. And finally, pour on that secret sauce, a mindset that's all about the process, not the outcome.
And really, that's what this all boils down to. The goal here isn't to become some kind of chess monk who studies 10 hours a day. The goal is to make the time you do have really count. By focusing on the quality of your practice instead of just the quantity, you can absolutely break through those frustrating plateaus and finally unlock real consistent improvement in your game. So the only question left is, are you ready to start studying smarter,